Imagine standing on a dusty plain, the morning sun casting long shadows across the hills of Greece. Before you stretches an army of tens of thousands, soldiers from every corner of the Persian Empire, the greatest power the world has ever seen. And facing them, barely 10,000 citizen soldiers from a tiny democracy called Athens, outnumbered, outmatched, and seemingly doomed. Yet, in the hours that followed, these ordinary men achieved a victory so astonishing that it would echo through centuries, shaping the very foundation of Western civilization. This is the story of the Battle of Marathon, where freedom and empire collided. The Battle of Marathon was fought in 490 BCE. On one side stood the mighty Persian Empire ruled by Darius I, a king who controlled lands from India to Egypt, with limitless resources and armies. On the other stood Athens, a city-state barely a generation into its bold experiment with democracy. The stakes were clear. If Athens fell, democracy itself might die before it had the chance to grow. But to understand how two such unequal forces ended up clashing on a coastal plain in Greece, we need to step back and see how the Persian Empire rose and why Athens became its target. Founded by Cyrus the Great, the Persian Empire grew into a superpower unmatched in size and influence. Stretching across 3 continents, it included a kaleidoscope of cultures, languages, and religions. By the time Darius I took the throne in 521 BCE, Persia had become the model of imperial might. But Darius wanted more. His empire, vast as it was, had a vulnerable western frontier, the fiercely independent Greek city-states. For Darius, conquering Greece was both a strategic necessity and a personal ambition. The spark came from the Ionian Revolt. In 499 BCE, Greek cities under Persian rule rebelled, with help from Athens and the small city of Eretria. Together they attacked and even burned the Persian city of Sardis. The revolt was crushed, but the insult burned deep. Darius was said to command a servant to whisper in his ear every day, "Master, remember the Athenians." Revenge was inevitable. Darius first demanded earth and water, tokens of submission from the Greek city-states. Many complied, but Athens and Sparta refused. The Spartans even threw Persian envoys into a well, telling them to find their earth and water there. In 490 BCE, Darius sent a massive expedition under his commanders Datis and Artaphernes the Younger. Their orders were simple: punish Eretria and Athens. The Persians struck first at Eretria, besieging the city for 6 days before betrayal from within opened the gates. The Persians burned temples, enslaved the population, and reduced Eretria to rubble. Next, they sailed across the Aegean toward Athens, guided by an old ally, the exiled tyrant Hippias, who had once ruled Athens and now sought restoration under Persian rule. The Persian fleet landed at Marathon, a broad plain 42 kilometers from Athens. The stage was set. News of Eretria's destruction sent shockwaves through Athens. The Athenians knew the Persians were coming, but how could a city of only 30,000 adult men stand against the empire? Athens dispatched a runner, Pheidippides, on a desperate mission to Sparta, over 150 miles away. Astonishingly, he covered the distance in just 2 days, but the Spartans, bound by a religious festival, refused to march until the next full moon. Help would not arrive in time. Athens had to stand alone, almost. One ally came to their side, Plataea, a tiny city-state sending just 1,000 warriors. Their sacrifice would be remembered for centuries. Roughly 10,000 Athenians and 1,000 Plataeans assembled. They were hoplites, heavily armored citizen soldiers. Each carried a large bronze shield, a spear, and a short sword. They fought in the phalanx, a wall of overlapping shields and projecting spears. Discipline and unity were their strength. The Persians brought between 20,000 and 25,000 men, including archers, infantry, and cavalry. Their soldiers were lightly armed, favoring mobility and ranged combat. They were diverse, drawn from every corner of the empire. Among them were the feared immortals, the Persian elite guard. The Persians relied on their cavalry, swift horsemen who could outmaneuver the heavy Greek hoplites. Landing on the wide, flat plain of Marathon was a deliberate choice, perfect terrain for cavalry maneuvers. For nearly a week, the two armies stared at each other across the plain. Neither side moved. The Athenians held the high ground, wary of the Persian cavalry. The Persians, meanwhile, waited for Athens to surrender or for reinforcements to weaken the Greek resolve. Then fortune shifted. The Athenian general Miltiades observed that much of the Persian cavalry had reboarded their ships, preparing for a naval strike against undefended Athens. This was the moment. Miltiades convinced his fellow generals, attack now or lose everything. On the morning of September 12th, 490 BCE, the Athenians advanced. At first they marched. Then, as they came within bow range, they did something no one expected. They ran. Charging across the plain under a hail of arrows, they crashed into the Persian lines with terrifying speed. Miltiades had devised a brilliant plan. He thinned his center, but reinforced his flanks. As the Persian elite pushed back the weak Athenian center, the stronger Greek wings smashed the Persian flanks. Then, pivoting inward, the wings encircled the Persian center in a deadly pincer movement. Trapped, the Persian formation collapsed. Panic spread. Many Persians fled to their ships. Others were cut down in the chaos. Herodotus records that about 6,400 Persians were killed, compared to just 192 Athenians and 11 Plataeans. Though the numbers may be exaggerated, the scale of Greek victory was undeniable. Amid the carnage, heroes fell, including Callimachus, the Athenian commander, who died fighting at the front. But their sacrifice ensured the city's survival. The Persians weren't finished. Their fleet sailed swiftly around Cape Sunion, aiming to strike Athens while its defenders were still at Marathon. But the Athenians marched back, all 42 kilometers, in a single day. Exhausted yet determined, they reached the city just as the Persian ships arrived. Seeing the hoplite army already in position, the Persians lost their nerve and withdrew. Athens was saved. Here enters the legend of Pheidippides once more. According to later accounts, he ran from Marathon to Athens, burst into the assembly and declared, "We have won," before collapsing and dying. This tale inspired the modern marathon race, immortalizing his endurance. The victory at Marathon was more than military, it was symbolic. A tiny democracy had defeated the world's greatest empire. For Athens, the triumph proved that citizens fighting for their freedom could overcome overwhelming odds. It preserved their fledgling democracy and inspired confidence that would lead to the golden age of Athens, with its philosophy, art, and science that still influence us today. For Persia, Marathon was a setback, not the end. Darius planned a larger invasion, but his death in 486 BCE left the task to his son Xerxes I. A decade later, Xerxes would march on Greece with an army said to number in the hundreds of thousands, leading to epic clashes at Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea. Yet Marathon remained unique, the moment when everything could have ended for Athens, but instead, a new chapter for Western civilization began. Unity in crisis, Athens and tiny Plataea proved that unity could overcome overwhelming odds. Innovation in strategy, Miltiades' bold tactics turned weakness into strength. The power of democracy, ordinary citizens, not kings or mercenaries, defended their freedom and shaped history. Endurance and sacrifice, from Pheidippides' legendary run to the last stand of Callimachus, the battle showed the human spirit at its peak. The Battle of Marathon was more than just a clash of armies. It was a clash of ideas, empire against freedom, tyranny against democracy, and against all expectations, freedom won. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to subscribe to Tale Haven, where history's greatest stories come alive. Because the past is never just the past, it's the foundation of our world today.